Welcome to a new episode of Big Bun Game Club. I am going to talk about Tales of Arise. After months of not playing it, putting it off, I finally finished it, and I have some thoughts on this game. I know it was one of the most anticipated games of 2021, so I was interested to see where I was going to end up with this game because I kind of feel that this game had people who either really loved Tales of Arise or kind of did not like it as much. And I was just curious to see where I was going to end up being as far as enjoyment of this game. So let's just get into the gameplay. It is an action RPG, and I think it's one of my. I don't want to say it's my all-time favorite action RPG, but it is one of my favorites that I've played. I played Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that action RPG combat sucked ass. I did not like it at all. It just seemed way too convoluted to me. I don't know. It didn't click with me. This one seemed much more satisfying and enjoyable. Where if you want to play as a pure hack and slash, you could. It just wouldn't be that. It wouldn't be easy if you just played as a mindless hack and slash. It would be decent, but I do like that you can switch between your party members. You can really play to your play style because you have characters that are projectiles, like with magic or with yeah, mostly magic, to be honest. Let's be real here. You have healers, you have defensive based characters like Kasara. You have Dohalim, which is a staff user, so he's also a magic user, so he's mostly doing spells. Each spell has a different kind of foundation depending on what you're looking for. I kind of think the well-rounded magic user is Ringwell. I keep switching her name between Ringwell and Rimwell, so sorry, but I think she's the most well-rounded magic user compared because I think Shion is good if you want to use like explosives, projectile-based magic attacks that are mostly used for like traps or just kind of doing all kinds of strategic shit. And then you have her as a healer, while Ringwell is not a healer at all, so you just have to deal with whatever magic she has. Uh, and then you have Alfin, which is your sword-based character, who plays pretty generically as you'd expect, but I do think he's a much more satisfying character. I end up playing the game majority of the time as him because I think his sword attacks are just really satisfying when you just land a well hit attack. You get to combo into your flame sword if you build up meter, all that kind of stuff. I really liked using him, and I kind of wish there were more reasons for me to switch to other characters because I didn't really love using Kasara. She just is way too slow, and I didn't like her dodge button. It was just a block, and it just didn't seem right to me. Well, everyone can do a parry and they can do all this cool stuff, and it's like Kasara, you really have to get good with the shield, and it just did not feel right to me. Uh, so you could switch between the four characters, which I like. You can also have like a second deck of characters because obviously, like most RPGs, your party can only have four active members. Obviously, the other two get sent off to like this other weird wheel that you pretty much use them if they have like their meter built up and you want them just to land a blow. With Kasara, if her meter is full, you'll pretty much be using her as like as a super parry or whatever. And then Law, which I had him on my back burner party, Law was just gonna be a guy that just punches shields. I didn't really have much use for him, to be completely honest, but he was a solid character nonetheless. But I never liked playing as him either because he gets up and close with enemies, and I just didn't like any of his moves. I didn't really mess around with their arts as much. I messed around with like Shion's, Ringwell's, uh, Dohalim, and Alfin's arts, but not a lot with like Sarah or Law. And that was just honestly out of laziness, to be completely honest with you. Other than that, I think the combat is still very satisfying. You can play however you want with it. The thing that this game does decently well, like most decent RPGs, is that when you're going against enemies that are either above your level or under your level, for the most part, I want to make this clear, for the most part, you can definitely tell when you're either over leveled for a fight or you're under leveled. for the most part. Again, as I said, because there are a lot of weird fights in this game that just didn't seem right to me. But we'll get into that when we get into that. But it does a decent job overall, just kind of giving you a decent challenge with each enemy you run into. My only issue with the gameplay of Tales of Arise, I don't know if I just suck, but I didn't feel there was enough side missions. I don't know, like I guess the thing is I'm used to the game automatically putting side missions on the map. So whatever side missions I saw on the map, I thought those were it. So for the longest time, I just had that library mission, which I didn't do because I thought it was boring. So I never did it, never finished it. But I had all these other side missions in my activity log, and I was like, oh, I could have been doing these. And as much as I complained about how hard it is to really to like for me to realize I had to go into this other menu, and they kind of put the missions into this weird menu which you would never, in my opinion, think to look. You have to go to like data and then go to artifacts or whatever, and it's like, why not just have a little blade for objective or mission log or something like every other RPG on the planet? Like, I don't know. I thought that was just really odd, and it didn't really click with me for the most part. I kept forgetting about it. But the side missions are very fucking dull. I hated them. I mostly only did them because they gave you decent money. But other than that, they were not very memorable. I didn't even care about reading the dialogue. A lot of the dialogue was just kind of like, I need you to find 5 of this thing so I can make this thing, but these monsters are dangerous. It's like, okay, I don't care. And this guy sped right through most of them. The only ones that seem to have like deep importance are the ones that had like character mini stories. Like there was one for Law where Law finds a letter that he reads and he comes back to the village and it's like a secret hidden ending that you can find. And those are for every party member. I don't know if I did them for like Rimwell or anyone else. I think I was about to and I just kind of gave up on it. I don't know. I honestly don't remember. But I know I did the one for Law. And those were the only side missions that were of note. All of them are just very, very boring and dull. There's one main mission that really comes off as a side mission, and at that point in the game, I just stopped playing because I was like, okay, I did this really cool like mission, and now this main mission that they gave me is like, someone's taking the food. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna stop playing. This is very fucking dull, and I hated it. So some of the missions and mostly the side missions are very, very dull, and they don't really have anything that makes you care. And I'm not looking for side missions that are like well written or bombastic or whatever, but they could be at least a little bit more interesting. Like SMT5 side missions, I would argue, are much more interesting than the ones that were in Tales of Arise. Like, as silly as the side mission is for Black Frost, where he's like, hey, Dionysus is hogging all the wine. Kill him so I can get the wine, bitch. And you're like, oh, alright, fuck him up. And you fuck up Dionysus, and he's like, hey, man, you're strong, you're cool, I'm gonna join your party. It's like, okay. Like, it had cool side missions like that were actually kind of funny and, like, interesting. And then there's one with, like, Asperus and Leanna, as I call it, the one with the spoon, whatever. Like, it's like Leanna and Sid or whatever. That's a good side mission. While Tales of Arise, the side missions are all like kind of like they kind of come off as like just boring ass MMO quest lines that were just kind of dull. And I know that SMT5 had a lot of those too, so I'm not gonna necessarily say SMT5 had perfect side missions, but I found them much more egregious in Tales of Arise, especially when this game had long periods of time where I was just having to grind to catch up to a lot of the areas, and for the most part, I never felt like I was behind level-wise. That was a big thing for me in, like, SMT 3 and 5, but I felt like that I was, like, keeping up with the recommended levels for Tales of Arise. I was only, like, near the end when it's like, oh, now I need to be, like, 10 levels higher to do this. Okay. And that's really when I started to just really despise the side missions, because they don't, depending on the side mission you do, you may not even get experience. Like, you have to find ones that deal with enemy encounters. If you're doing one that's like a fetch quest that is literally nothing, You won't get experience for it. You'll get money for it, which is fine because you'll get armor. You could get armor with it. You could get items. You get all this kind of stuff, which is like great and solid. But if you're just trying to get experience, you'll just kind of be disappointed into knowing that you'll probably be forced into just fighting endless waves of enemies. And I know SMT3 didn't initially come with a grind dungeon, but I kind of like that the remaster you could get a grind dungeon in that game because I kind of feel like these games need to give you a better way to gain levels than what they do. Because I would fight all these enemies, and yeah, you can like you get a combo meter like I would say halfway through the game, where if you max it out, you'll fight. Excuse me, you'll fight higher level enemies. Or bigger enemies, and you'll get bonus experience, bonus money. You get all these bonuses added to your party, and that's great. But I never really noticed anything that was like significant about the bonuses that I got. It was to the point where I just kind of got frustrated, and I kind of put the game down for like extended periods of time because it's like I don't really enjoy this game right now. Like the amount of grind I have to do is just not satisfying. And I think that's one of my major issues with Tales of Arise. The gameplay is fun when you're just kind of doing missions and you're doing stuff that's like meaningful or just moving the story along. And then you get to this point where it's like, oh, I need to be higher level, and it just becomes frustrating. The final area of Tales of Arise is one of my least favorite areas in any game. It's not I wouldn't say it's as bad as SMT5, where the final area of that game just feels like they dumped higher level enemies because they cut a world out or whatever. This just seemed kind of needlessly frustrating and repetitive. So you go through this like planet or whatever, this like labyrinth or whatever, and you don't get any checkpoints at all, and that wouldn't be such a big deal, but you'll go through your magic or your CP very quickly because your party will be healing they'll be using magic spells and all this stuff, unless you set them to not do that, which is like, yeah, you could do that, but then you'll be running the risk of just getting killed and you have no one to heal you, so it's like, whatever. Uh, but you'll be going through all these enemies that are just bigger enemies that they just kind of throw at you back to back to back, where it's just like, come on. And then when you get to right before the final boss, there's a teleporter there. There is teleporters in this that are like semi checkpoints, but they're very long to get to, so it's like quite a way to get to each checkpoint when you're just walking from like point A to point B, then to B to C. So to get to those checkpoints, you'll be going through a lot of levels, a lot of enemies, and all that kind of stuff. So the area right before the final boss, there's a teleporter there. The teleporter did not turn on for me because it kept telling me like there's astral energy here. You gotta fucking until it's gone, you won't be able to use the teleporter or whatever the fuck. So you have to go through this 6 teleporters, kill the enemies, at least I think 3 of the astral enemies, and then you can use the teleporter. Then you can activate it, which is all fine and good, but when you get there, your CP is going to be pretty low, and you're going to be exhausting of your items. You're going to be low on health if you're just unlucky. So when you fight these enemies can be like very difficult enemies that can just wipe out your party if you're not careful. So I was like level like high 40s, low 50s, and these enemies were just knocking the floor, mopping the floor with me because it would either be like a party of enemies that are just higher level than me, or they're just harder enemies. And it's like I just got off of going through all these enemies, so how am I gonna fucking beat this? And it's like if I leave to come back, I have to go through all that again. And it's like I'll be going through big enemies again. I'll be going through my CP again. All this. And it just got to the point where it's like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I put the game down because that was just frustrating me. The more I was like thinking about it. So I put the game down. I was like, I don't want to go back to this right now. This is just way too tiresome. The boss fights are They start off like the very first boss fight you get, which is the first Lord. I think is gives you a good sense of idea of what you'll be up against. But each Lord after him, I feel in some weird way just is disappointing in every single way. The only one that was like interesting was I keep forgetting her name. It's like the Lord of Hate or whatever. Like she makes people hate her or something, and then she gets powerful, some shit like that. And that was a hard boss fight. Like I kind of liked it because it had all these phases and there's so much going on with it that was like an actual like challenging boss fight. It just sucked that you would have to go through so much to get to that point. So it's like, come on. Uh, but these other lords after the first one, like the second one you run into is a very lame boss fight. He has this one overpowered move that just kept wiping my party out, and I couldn't like stagger him out of it. Like the game would intentionally leave him charging up for his big wind up attack, and everyone's wailing on him, and it's never enough to stop the attack. So I would always either be near death or dead. So it's like it's a mad dash to the start menu so I could heal my party or heal myself, whatever I need to do, before he either does another attack like that or he just wipes me out before I could do anything. So that boss fight just sucked because it just seemed a little silly that it was that hard. Oh, and then the one where then the third boss fight isn't really a Lord boss fight, and this is kind of where it almost feels like that they wanted to be like Suda 51, where they just play with your expectations, where it's like, okay, the Lord's actually on your side, and now you're gonna be fighting this monster, and the monster fight was just another boring fucking monster fight. You fought all these monsters till this point, and it's like, okay, and it becomes a normal enemy too on top of that, so it's like, what are we doing here? Uh, and then you fight the Lord of Hate after that, which is whatever. Then you fight this one guy, and this fight was needlessly hard. Like it just seemed kind of like it was overstaying its welcome by the last phase of that fight. It's like, okay, dude, just fucking die. Like, come on. And I only won by sheer chance that I was spamming magma cutter. I don't fucking remember the name of the move. But I just spammed that with Shion, just zoning him and just spamming that just to beat it because I just had enough with this fucking boss fight. I didn't want to go back and start again. So it's like, I have to beat it now. Fuck it. So that was just by sheer chance I beat it. And then after that, you kind of fight him. You fight this guy again, like multiple times, and then you get to the final boss. The final boss fight is I don't understand. I think it's Almadria. That must be the Lord of Hate's name or whatever her name is. That boss fight was way harder because she would summon these monsters and you'd be fighting two boss fights at the same time. It'd be this like intense thing. The final boss, you'd be sitting there thinking, oh, this is gonna be fucking hard. I was level 54 when I beat the game, and the final boss was like 61. And I fucking bodied him. And I was like, and I know there's like a phase in that fight that's like a scripted fight. Like you're just meant to win. Like the whole thing, like nothing that the boss is doing to you is doing anything to you. So you're just like wailing on him for free, pretty much. But before that, it's like this is a fight. Why am I wailing on this guy so easily? Like I'm staggering him all the time. Like I would dodge, hit him. Oh my god, he would just stagger. Okay. And then my boost combo, whatever the fuck, would charge up. Okay. Staggered again. And then he just staggered to just normal attacks. I'm just like, I'm like under leveled and I'm staggering this guy like it's nothing. I'm like, what's going on with this? And I don't know like if the whole fight was a scripted fight because like you can still die in that fight, but it's like once you know how to dodge the ice attacks, like there's one that he did that seemed like it was gonna be the whole stage, but it was just kind of certain areas that he would do it. So it's like, okay, once you know that, you'll never die after that. So it just seemed like a very weird fight that felt scripted when the game kind of gives you this impression that it's not. It was very disappointing. And the fight before that was this monster thing, and that was also a disappointing fight because the fight seemed like it was gonna be this epic boss fight, but it was just like, hey, just mash. Oh, look, the weak points are there. Mash the weak points. Okay. And the only thing that was challenging about that fight was the weak points were on specific body parts, and you could easily miss the hitbox with it. So it just seemed kind of needlessly dumb. It was such a boring fight, and I was just like, this is the final boss. Like, if you look at SMT5, that like the final boss is whatever in that game too, to be completely honest, but I feel that has at least more of an impact than this did. Like, I just kind of was like, okay. Like, I just don't know why. Like, I just didn't feel anything with it. It just didn't have a lasting impact on me. The XP sucks. The combat's kind of whatever. Like, the more I was playing it, I wouldn't like I didn't despise the game or hate the game, but it just made me feel like the pacing just seems really weird. And in a game club podcast I had with Charles, where he mentioned like there's certain games he played where he doesn't know if it's he doesn't know if the game is designed to make you buy microtransactions or if he truly just sucks for this kind of fight or whatever. And I started to feel that with Tales of Arise, where it's just like, I don't know if I'm dying or if I'm sucking because I just am either underleveled or I'm just sucking at the game, or if the game is designed to, for microtransactions because, or whatever, or just like something like that. It just seemed really weird because there is no microtransactions. You can't buy experience in this game, but the game feels that way. I really don't know how to describe it than that, because it just, I was playing, I was like, I feel like I shouldn't be dying or like struggling as much in this fight as I am. There were fights like the Almeida fight, I think I was the same level, maybe a little bit over, and the boss was just mopping the floor with me. I was like, this can't be this hard. Like, yeah, it's not gonna be a cakewalk either, but it's like I feel like it's doing way too much damage. Like, I've gotten I've gotten better weapons, so it's like, because, you know, ironically, as I complain about this, I kept a lot of the early game weapons for like, I would say until I fought like the third area. I think is when I started to realize, oh, I have material to make better weapons. I should be doing this. I think that's kind of when I realized I could get better equipment through playing this game. So at the point where I started to feel this way was way after that, where I got better weapons, better armor, and I started putting more experience and SP points into other abilities. And it's like I don't know what else I could do. Like, I don't know if it's a skill issue with me. Maybe I'm really bad, but it's like I don't know. Like, this other fight I just did was very easy, but this one's like very challenging. I was very confused with that. There's these other side missions in the game, before I forget about them, that contribute to what I at least understand. There's like a secret dungeon that kind of has these that's for fan servicey kind of players who have played other Tales games. They have these little dungeons that kind of like reference that or whatever. I've tried the Spirit Temple, the one where you're going up a mountain or whatever the fuck. I've done those two, and I hated them. Like, the boss fights were very hard because like I these are like I feel are like post game kind of dungeons, or just designed for New Game Plus, to be honest. But the challenges wasn't fun, and I just didn't feel any desire to beat them. So it's like that's there, and that's nice that it's there for fans, but I didn't really care to beating them. I like the idea of these temples that or these side missions that open up. I do like the idea of that, but I just didn't have any desire to really do them. So I think that's as much as I want to talk about the gameplay, because it's overall, as far as gameplay is concerned, it's solid. I think it's a solid game. I wouldn't say it's awful or bad, but I do think that the difficulty just seems kind of weird. It just seems kind of all over the place. Like, I don't know. Like, I really don't know how to describe it, because it's like, yeah, if I suck, I suck, but some of these fights just seem like I should not be struggling as much as I was in this game. Um so that's the gameplay. So let's get into the story, because this was something that I was kind of bored with at the beginning of the game, and then I came around to it, and then the ending happened, and I felt another way. So there will be spoilers, so if you haven't beaten the game yet, go play the game or whatever, come back and watch the rest of the video. You've been warned. So it's kind of a generic plot you've come to expect. It feels very like traditionally, I hate to say it feels traditionally anime, but that's kind of the best description. It's like the same story you've seen repackaged before 1,000 times. You're a character named Alfin who feels no pain. He suffers through amnesia, so he doesn't remember his past. He joins these rebels that are trying to fight the oppressive Renans, who are trying to make these Danans their slaves, all that kind of stuff. You've seen this story before. Along the way, they find this woman named Shion. They find out that she's also a Renin, but they have her in like they have her like as a prisoner. So they're like, what's going on? So they try to figure out what's going on with her. Why was she a prisoner? They don't trust her because she's Renin. You can't trust Renins because of how the world is in this game. So it starts off in a very generic kind of setup where now Alfin and Shion have to team up and take down all these lords and fight a common enemy. And they're very distant. They kind of are cold to each other. And by the end, they warm up and they're best friends. They love each other. It's a love story, and there's nothing wrong with that. But one of the major issues with this story it affects not just the main characters but almost every character. The arcs that they've written for like Ringwell and Doholim, Kisara and Doholim, Alpha and Shion, they all just seem to be resolved with very minor development. Like Shion and Alpha are the only ones that do feel like that they get development for their arc, but that's because it's like the story revolves around them, so they kind of do, but it still feels kind of rushed in a lot of ways. So they start to like not like each other at the beginning of the game. They're cold. They're just like, hey, I'm just here just to kill the lords, okay? Just get out of my way and you'll be good. It's like, okay, fine, bitch. Like so they're very cold with each other. They don't like get along. And then suddenly, out of the blue, like Alvin starts to have concern for Shion, and Shion starts to have concern for him a little bit. Of course, in a very cold and kind of like, shy way or whatever. She's very, guys, she's very tsundere, okay? So that's the kind of whole thing with that, and it just seems very lame because they don't resolve it in a very meaningful or like earned way. Like for example, like when you finish the second area of the game and you're like about to leave, like Shion just straight up tells like Alfin, look, if Law wants to join us and he dies, he chose this, okay, or whatever. Like he just pretty much tells him to like just deal with it, whatever, and then walks off. And then Alpha's like, that bitch, like she can say whatever she pleases. And he says this like multiple times before that as well. And then like the next area, he's just like, Shion's cool. Why are you being mean to her? It's like, why are you suddenly like buddy with her? It's like he starts to get very like friendly with her, and it's like, why? Like, yeah, you're obviously you're not gonna hate each other because you're in a party and you're trying to take down the lords and all this stuff, but it's like there was nothing for Alfin to reconsider what he was thinking of her, because at this point in the story, he just kept telling her like, look, I know you're Renin and all this stuff, but you're fighting with us now, and that's cool and all this stuff. And it's like, why? Like, you were like suspicious of her for the longest time. What made him suddenly trust her overnight? Like, it just didn't really make sense to me. It just seemed like, okay, yeah, I trust you now. It's like, and that's like a very like, I would argue it's debatable to be honest with that, but It's much more egregious. I would say for Ringwell and Doholim, that conflict they had, or even like Ringwell and Shion as well. Like those conflicts don't seem to be resolved in a meaningful way. It's like Ringwell was just like Shion's gonna betray us. I don't trust her at all. Shion, I really can't wait. I hope you could like I can like hold your hand at some point. It's like, come on, like, why suddenly are these people like, suddenly being friends when there's like no like it's not even like they just met and they're like, oh, okay, like that's your name, okay, cool, and whatever. It they had like they were suspicious of her and they didn't trust her, and suddenly they go from that to, hey, I trust her now, she's cool. It's like, why? What happened? And then, like, for Ringwald, they'd be like, hey, Dolim's cool. Yeah, like, because, like, there were multiple times where Ringwald just straight up tells Dolim in these, like, optional cutscenes that you can, like, press, like, RB on, where she just straight up says, like, your people erase our history, and you're, like, looking at it as if it's, like, some collectible thing. Like, what a fucking asshole. And he's just like, whoa, man, calm down. I just like things, dude. And then, like, there was another cutscene where Alfin just tells him to shut up and deal with it, and they're like, okay, yeah, we're cool now. It's like, what? Like, and there were just these instances where it's like these conflicts just get resolved, and it just seems like they get resolved because they have to for the plot. And it's just really, really disappointing, especially when these character types are not new types of personalities or have never been done before or anything. Like, there's so many animes that have done this same kind of story where a group of like to bring this up. Okay, guys, this is gonna be a very like baller comparison. It's like Persona 5. Okay, Makoto joins the party. They don't trust Makoto because Makoto was trying to snitch on them to the principal or whatever the fuck. They eventually become friends with her because they start to empathize with her and they start to like see things going on, and it's like, oh shit, like we get it. Whatever. That never happens in Tales of Arise. There was no moment of this empathy until like I would say halfway to the end of the game is when they start to get reasons to be empathetic. But at that, even before that, they were already like cool with her. So it's like this would have been like way more impactful if this was the moment that everyone in the party was like, "Oh shit, Shion is like one of us or whatever." Like that could have been the moment. And it's just like, no, there was no moment of it. It's just they trusted her over time, I guess. And it's like part of me does wonder if the intent was that whole conflict to be carried through the gameplay. Like the gameplay has you like going through all these journeys, like walking there from point A to point B every time, and they do talk to each other, in combat and all this stuff. And I guess I would assume that's kind of when they intended for that development to happen. But when you're playing the game, you're not listening to the story when you're doing combat. Like that's not really an ideal place to drop story beats. So it just seemed kind of weird if that was the case. The story revolving the lords, about fighting the lords to stop the crown contest. It's an interesting premise. Again, it's very safe. It's like, yeah, who's gonna be empathetic to these lords that made these people their slaves? Like, it's not it's not anything new or interesting, because it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, fuck them. The only time that it got interesting was when you went to Doholim's area. That is kind of when it got a little bit interesting, where it's like, oh, the Danans and the Renans are like living peacefully. Oh, this is interesting. This is like really like what's going on. And I was thinking there was something very like shady and creepy. Like you're gonna find out that he brainwashed the whole like town or something. Like they were kind of talking about how like maybe their water supply was poisoned with something or whatever. I was like, oh, maybe like they poisoned their food with like drugs that make them like like just praise the Lord or whatever the fuck. I don't whatever. And then you find out that they were drugging them, but it's not in a way you think. They drugged them so that they would eventually become like this hollow water or whatever to become energy, which is kind of fucked up, but it wasn't the Lord doing it. It was like the Lord's right hand guy. And it's like, and the right hand guy looks so fucking sketchy. And you're just like, yeah, this guy's gonna fucking betray the Lord, and Lord Dohalim's cool. And it just kind of bummed me out that it played exactly how it was. Like, this was like a good time to really open more compelling plot lines with Dohalim, and where he stands with the crown contest, the Renans, the Danans, and all this stuff. But it doesn't do it in a meaningful way. It's just, it does it in a meaningful way for him, as in a way that he only wanted the Danans and Renans to live like to coexist, is because he hated what happened in his past, and he was running away, and he did this out of fear. Like, he didn't do it because he wanted to. He just did it because he was just afraid of like of power, or being part of the crown contest or whatever. And it's like, that's cool on a character level, but I think it would have been interesting if this took a darker turn. And after that, you run into this village that was like decrepit, destroyed, ruined, and all this stuff, to later find out the Lord there was making these people like hateful or whatever, so that she would get more powerful through that hateful energy or whatever. And it's like, that's kind of cool. I did like that part of the game, but it goes by so quickly that it's just like, all right. And the game kind of just treats her like comic relief by the end. Like, you fight her, and then like the game just throws her like into the trash can pretty much. It's like, all right, you're done. It's like, what? This is the end of this character, of this character, just gets thrown to the fishes like so easily. It's just like, okay, whatever. And that story was interesting, but it as I said, it's straightforward and it doesn't really go anywhere. And then you go to the final Lord fight, which is Valron. I always used I was talking to people in my Discord about this game, and I kept combining Valron and Dohalim's name together all the time. So I kept calling him Vohalim, and it's like, that's not his name. His name is Volron. And the character sucked. I'll be honest, I hated Volron. I really thought he was the worst character they put into a game, because he's so dull. It's such a dull idea. All right, Alfin, he's like the main character, the hero guy. Give him Fire Sword, and he's like this Sovereign dude. All right, his rival, who also wants to capture Shion, Ice Sword. Like, okay. Very straightforward. And they capture Shion, right? He captures Shion at one point in the game. He really wants her. And I don't say I don't understand it, because they do explain it, but I don't think I just thought it was dumb. And I just didn't understand or cared. Like, he captures Shion, and they don't really do anything. And like, they made it seem like it was a big plot point. Like, oh, she's gonna be forced to like join. Because at this point in the game, when I was playing the game and going through the story, I was saying in my mind, I bet she's running from an arranged marriage kind of deal. Like, oh, since she's a maiden or whatever the fuck, and she's running, she has to marry this dude for power or whatever the fuck. And that's what I was expecting. And then the game's like, no, that's not what's going on. But Valron wanted her so that he could like kill the main bad guy or whatever. And that's like fine, but it just was lame, because it just kind of was like, all right, I got her. Put her in a room. There we go. And it's like, dude, this dude had a game plan to kill the final boss, the Renin spirit or whatever the fuck. He had this plan to do this. Doesn't defend her, just puts her in a room, leaves her there, and it's like, all right, it is what it is. It's like, you don't want to at least have something protecting her, or, I mean, I guess he trusted the Thorns would keep them at bay, but it's like, they fought all this way there. Why would they just stop now? It's like, oh man, Thorns, guys, we should go home. We can't continue. Like Like it just seemed really stupid. It just seemed really dumb, and it just I kind of feel like it was at that point. I was saying to myself like, it should have been an arranged marriage. Like that would have been much more interesting than this. And at this point, when Alfin reaches Shion, saves her, it gave me vibes of G Gundam, where G Gundam's had one of my least favorite endings. I hated the ending of G Gundam. Like I loved it all the way until the end, where it's like, oh, like pretty much the way that Alphen saves Shion is through the power of love, pretty much, and I hate that. It's so lame. Like I would argue it's more lame in fucking Tales of Arise than G Gundam, because G Gundam at least it gave you a fight scene and it gave you something that was like more emotional because you connected with Domo and Rain throughout G Gundam. Like you like empathize with them. You understood those characters from the first episode to the end. Like Alpha and Shion, like their whole thing, as I said before, seemed rushed. So when you got to that point, it's like, okay, really, like there was no reason for Alphen before to trust Shion. He just decides I'm gonna trust you for like really no impactful reason or reasonable reason. Meanwhile, like you see this scene, it's like, all right, Shion, you're not alone. I love you. Hugs, and then she like becomes cool again. It's like this is lame. It's everything after that point. It just felt like we need this to happen so this can happen, and it's just disappointing because the game. I've said this before on many podcasts. When a game puts a lot of like effort into the storytelling, you kind of have to tell a good story. And Tales of Arise at this point just it felt like it was wasting my time. At that point, after I beat Valron that first time, I dealt with that boring ass boss fight. I clocked out. I was like, I just want to beat this game. This is not fucking rad. And I said in the gameplay segment, right after you beat Valron, the very first mission, the very first mission they give you in this second half of the game. Hey, this guy so the food is missing. You gotta find the food. That to me was pissed me off. It's like I want to know what's going on because the scenes before it, Shion was like not being like open to Alphen at all. Like she's not telling, like she's hiding something and not telling him. And we go from that interesting plot point to guys, the food is missing. Where's the food? It's like to make more memes. It's like when you watch Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, and you get this interesting stuff with like Luke and Rey, and then it cuts to this stupid ass fucking, oh, we gotta go to this casino and save these animals and whatever. The part of Episode 8 that felt like the prequel movies, that part is what happened here, and I was just like, I have to find food, okay, and I just dropped the game for like another week because that just deflated me. It's like I did this long ass boss fight. I get an interesting cutscene story beat. I have to find food. Goodbye. And then I eventually decided I need to get through this game. So I just started doing it. I just kind of sped read that. I didn't read a single dialogue after I did this quest because it was just like, gotta eat the food. Man, we found these people who really loved Valron. Yeah, they really love him. It's like, okay. This is what we're doing. It does get at least a little bit more interesting when you start to see like, oh, this weird like tree thing landed in Dana and they have to inspect it, and you see that it was Dana's energy and all this stuff, and you start to, and then you want to go to Lenegis, then you go from Lenegis to Rena, whatever, and at that point in the game, the story just kind of it just kind of happens. Like they bring up this woman in red, and they bring up this conspiracy with this woman in red, and how there was no real like sovereign for Lenegis at all. Like they were told, oh, the sovereign for Lenegis gets sent to Rena, and I feel it's insinuated that they are pretty much killed at that point. Like they put them in a pot or whatever. They don't really tell you to your face what goes on with the Renans that get sent to be sovereign. It's just assumed that they get turned into energy or whatever the fuck. And you also find out that Renans are actually Danans, and the Helgast or whatever the fuck. I think it's Helgen. I don't. These species were also like brainwashed to obey the great Renan spirit to reset the world. All this stuff just gets dropped on you through a lot of exposition, and it's not interesting. Like it sounds interesting, like it is, but at the same time, it's like it isn't. I don't know. It's just odd. Like I like the idea of it, but it just doesn't do anything meaningful, I guess, because you find out that the crown contest is fake, but the characters talk about it as if it was real anyway. So it's like, okay. Um, and then when you find out like the Renans are Danans, it's like, okay, does this mean anything? Like, not really. Like the only thing it only really affected was Ringwell's fucking story or her character, because she found out that she's like Renans that do magic are also Danans, and it just kind of brings up this. It now that I'm saying it out loud, it kind of it's gonna sound like whatever, but it kind of sounds like a joke, because it's just like, I guess it's dark comedy, dude. It's dark comedy. A whole thing with Danans and Renans are dark comedy, I guess. But whatever. It's interesting in that kind of way that it recontextualizes the conflict between Renans and Danans, and it kind of belittles what's going on, and it feels like a very cheaply made Gurren Lagann, where Gurren Lagann starts off as a very like small conflict between the Spiral King and the people of the surface or whatever. It's a very, very like small conflict to the scale of what is revealed to you by the end of the show. And that's kind of rad. And I loved it in Gurren Lagann, but this just seems like it just seems like typical. Like, okay, yeah, like you beat Valron, the game continues. And you're just like, yeah, something's gonna happen. And you're just waiting for that beat to drop. And then you find out that the whole like spirit ceremony thing was related to the great spirit of Ren or whatever. You find out that like Shion's thorns are related to that, and um you have to kill Shion to kill the monster or whatever. And this is really so Alfin and his merry gang were like, we're gonna kill the great spirit of Rena because they're gonna ruin the world or whatever. So they go off and do that. They're just about to accomplish this, and then Valron shows up, because obviously he does. He never really truly dies. You fight him again a second time, by the way, and he just you see him in fire, and it's like, yeah, he's gonna survive. Like, I knew he was gonna survive, and I was just like, man, if there was one thing this game was gonna subvert, I hope it's that. And he didn't. So it's like, yeah, of course Valron survived, which is fucking bullshit. So yeah, you're doing the thing of killing the great spirit. Valron's like, I want to kill the spirit. It's like, dude, we were just doing that. The only thing that they added to make it seem like that he had a reason to stop them was he wanted to absorb the power so he would have the power himself. Which is like, okay, like I guess that's a reason. I mean, that's motivation to stop what they were doing, because they were just gonna find a peaceful way to do it or whatever the fuck. Which I get that's why he did it. It just I was just like, you know, he could have rid the wave of his own ego and be like, I don't need this power or whatever to rule the world, but he wanted that power, so it's like, I guess. And then you get that lame ass boss fight with him. But the other main issue with the story is that the Great Rena energy spirit thing isn't a compelling enemy. It's the same issue I've had with Breath of the Wild and the Zelda games, where Ganon is just a monster. I don't care. This thing's a fucking monster, and it just isn't cool. Like in Wind Waker, Ganondorf was a dude who did things, and it's like, that's fucking rad. He did things. Same with Ganondorf in Twilight Princess. He did things, and he did shit. And this, it's like Breath of the Wild, where it's this Calamity Ganon just doing animal shit. It's like, oh, okay. Like, they kept telling us, like, they kept telling the gamer, like, oh, he wants to reset the world or whatever. He wants to like merge these worlds together and all this stuff, which is an interesting, compelling story if it wasn't for Indivisible, because Indivisible is a much better story and a much better game. I would highly recommend Indivisible over this game any day of the week. I think Indivisible is a much more superior action RPG than Tales of Arise. Tales of Arise isn't terrible, but the story is just it it went. What made me a little bit disappointed with it is that it started off boring. I did not like it at all. I had no desire to continue playing it. I only continued because people were saying how good it was, so I stuck with it. I I stuck with it as I went on. The story grew on me. I did like the characters. The characters are likable. I just kind of wish the dialogue was the arcs and conflicts with each character was better resolved or better paced. It just seemed way too rushed to make them friends. To make them friends. I don't know how else to say it. It just I like the characters, but it just they didn't resolve any of their personal conflicts in a meaningful way. It just seemed kind of rushed to get them all to be friends by the end. So that was going on. The middle was interesting, and then the end kind of ends where it began, where it's just like this is kind of dull. I don't hate it. Like it is at least a little bit more interesting than the beginning, but I just didn't it didn't click with me as much as Gurren Lagann, G Gundam, SMT3, Indivisible, and all this stuff. Like it just kept telling me things that I liked, but it just wasn't interesting. They didn't tell it in an interesting way. Instead of hearing from the enemy, we heard it from Ringwell saying the energy says that they want to make a perfect world or whatever. And it's like, oh, okay, like cool, I guess. That's interesting. Meanwhile, you pop in Indivisible, the main villain literally tells you that to your face, and it's actually like depressing, and I actually felt shit about that. This is like another person telling me what this thing is thinking. Like that's interesting, but that's where it kind of stops. It just didn't I just did not care for the great Rena spirit or whatever. Uh, and then the ending. I am not against happy endings, and I kind of was expecting Shion was gonna live. Like I knew they weren't gonna kill her off. I just knew that, and I was like, that's fine. Like I don't. A story does not need to kill characters off to be good. Like my go-to example is Brand New Animal, Little Witch Academia. Like those shows had good stories that to me had impactful plots and conflicts and all this stuff, and none of those shows ended with a character dying. Like they didn't have to kill the main character or a main character to resolve anything, which I liked. It's actually like refreshing. I only criticize it when it feels kind of lazy or it's not or it doesn't offer anything interesting with it, like Kill la Kill. Kill la Kill has it's a fun story and a fun show, but no one really dies, so the stakes don't really feel like they go anywhere. And then it's all like dumped on Ryuko to save the day. And then it's like, okay, like it's a fun ride, but that's pretty much all Kill la Kill is. And I can't say Tales of Arise had a fun, like as far as story is concerned, was a fun ride. The story, like as I said, it starts off boring, and then like the middle part just kind of pissed me off with a boring ass fetch quest to do after you beat fucking Volron. And then after that, it's just like exposition time. And it's like, I don't care. Like, I don't care, like, that I have to hear Ringwell tell me what a monster is thinking. Like, that's whatever. And then you have the ending where it just, they save Shion in the most bullshit way. And it's so lazy to the point where it's like Shion, like not Shion, excuse me. Alfin turns away to get his sword, and he looks up and he sees like these particle effects in the sky. And it's like, wait a second, Ringwell said that this is energy and Danon energy, and we could talk to Danon energy and tell them to give us a little energy so that we can save you or whatever the fuck. And it's like, what? Like it just seemed it kind of felt like a stretch to say all this because even at that point like Ringo wasn't sure what she was saying. She was like, I think this is the case. Like, if you think about it, this seems to make sense. But then for Alvin to be like, it is fact. We should do this, and it just seemed kind of like a Hail Mary miracle to really pull out of thin air. I just didn't. It's like it's not meaningful. Like, it would have been more like, I would have liked it more if Alfin refuses, was like, I don't care, and he just goes fucking ham wild, goes wild, and starts like cutting down the tree or whatever the fuck. Like, he just goes like anime mode or whatever. Like, I would have liked that much more than, dude, energy. We can talk to energy. It's like, oh, okay. Like, it's kind of the same issue with a lot of, like, I want to say it's the Avatar series issue, because a lot of people want to say it's Korra specifically, but it's an Avatar. I'm sorry. Everything's a plot device. The main character doesn't want to do something, and then lo and behold, a thing shows up to say, you don't have to do the thing you don't want to do, buddy. Here you go. Like, in The Last Airbender, Aang does not want to kill Fire Lord Ozai, and then suddenly he's on a mountain lion turtle, whatever. I forgot the name of that animal. He's there, and then the guy's like, don't worry. You don't want to kill him? Here you go. You could take his bending away. It's like, that's it? That's what he did? Like, he didn't earn it. He didn't, like, find a more compelling way. He just was given a power to take away people's bending, and that was it. And and that's supposed to be a good way to end a story. It's like, it's just like, hey, you need to wrap it up. Here you go. And there's nothing wrong with, like, plot devices. Like, I don't have a very, like, oh my god, they have a plot device, but it feels more lazy in terms of Korra Book 2, where it just was like, Korra's getting bodied, and then, like, Jinora shows up randomly, for no reason, helps Korra, the spirit bend Unalaq away, and he's dead. Gone. Whatever. And it's like, that's it? That's the whole, that happened? Like, why did this happen? Meanwhile, you have, Tales of Arise, where just, Alfin's like, I decide to talk to the energy. There we go. You don't have to kill you, Shion. We did it. And there's nothing wrong with a happy ending either. The other issue I had with the ending is that it seemed kind of rushed. Like, there was no... The epilogue... There was, like, no epilogue. It was pretty much, after the credits roll, Alpha and Shion come from space, or whatever, and they kiss, and they smile at their party, and the party member hugs Shion, and then that's it. And it's like, that's cool, but what about, like, the town? Like, did they govern very well? Like, are they at peace? Like, you have Renans and Danans who hated each other very, very much. We're not gonna get at least a little bit of that, like, how that's gonna happen. Like, it felt like when you first beat Volron, you get a better epilogue for what happened than the epilogue for beating the great Arena Spirit, and it just didn't seem satisfying. Like, I beat the game and I didn't feel satisfied. It just was like, I beat it. Okay. And that's kind of lame. Like, when I beat, like, SMT3, it felt like an accomplishment. I felt, like, excited. And the ending I saw was fucking rad. Same with Persona 5. The first JRPG I beat was Persona 5. And that felt incredible. I was like, I did it. I did it for the first time. This feels great. The story was great. They gave you a decent epilogue to end the game. Tales of Arise just kind of gives you, like, just a little... They might as well give you, like, a postcard that says, thank you for playing our game. It's kind of like Mario 64. It ends the same way. Mario beats Bowser. He comes out of the castle. Peach kisses him. That's it. And that's the end of the game. And that's pretty much Tales of Arise. Story-wise, at least. So, my final thoughts on Tales of Arise. I know I probably forgot some beats of the plot and all that stuff. I'm sure I did. But overall, I would not say Tales of Arise is a bad game. I just don't think it was really worth the hype it got. Like, I understand, like, the gameplay is good, the production is good, like, I am happy that this game was a success for the company because I might get shit on from like Tales fans for saying this, but I kind of feel like Tales had always had like a not a niche audience or like a small audience, but it had like an audience that was just for Tales games. Meanwhile, I think Tales of Arise was the first Tales game that had more mainstream success, and I do like that this game was able to reach more people. Um, as I said, the combat was decent. Like there was just some issues with the pacing as far as level progression, story progression, and all that kind of stuff. But I I I am interested in playing other Tales games. I will say Tales of Arise is, as for someone who has never played a Tales game, Tales of Arise did accomplish getting me into the franchise. So I think as far as a game for someone who has never played a Tales game, I think Tales of Arise is a good place to start because it does get you interested in what came before that game. So I am interested in playing Tales of Vesperia, and I think there's one like Tales of Bergia, something with a B. But I am curious of playing that, and I didn't know that those games had co-op. So I was like, wow, this has multiplayer because Tales of Rise is completely single player, and it made me wonder. There was an article that came out like a few months ago where the developer was saying that the success of Tales of Rise is making them consider the future for Tales of games, and I just wonder what that really means. Like, I don't know if that means that they're gonna continue like telling the story of these characters, which I mean, whatever, or if they're gonna have like future Tales of games play exactly like Tales of Arise, which, as far as I understand it, the Tales of games sound like they all play differently. Because I've seen people say, "Oh, Tales of Vesperia is great. Tales of Bergia sucks," and I heard Tales of Bergia is great. So it's like it seems like each Tales of game like plays differently, and I wouldn't want future Tales of games to completely change, like to kind of play the same way as Tales of Arise. Like Persona 5 got very like mainstream successful. Like that got like a lot of mainstream attention. And a lot of people were afraid that this was gonna change SMT5 and rob SMT5 of its identity for being an SMT game. And I think that fear wasn't really founded in SMT5. I think SMT5 has a lot of other issues that I don't think is relevant to Persona 5 because SMT5's issues is more. I feel like it just felt like that. I talked about this in my last video. I don't know why I'm bringing it up again, but it just felt like that it got to the point where they had to release it. So it's like we'll just release at this date. But SMT5 at least still feels like an SMT game. It did not throw in stuff from Persona into SMT5 to please the Persona 5 audience. Like it at least retained its identity to a point. So I wouldn't want the future Tales of games to just kind of try to strike the same lightning that Tales of Rise did. I kind of hope that they keep making different, unique experiences. So I am curious to see what the next Tales of game is. I will play Tales of Vesperia at some point, so I am interested in the franchise. So it succeeded on that. So if I were to rate Tales of Arise, I would give it. You know, I, I, at its worst, I really want to give it a 6 because there was a lot I didn't love about it, but I think I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I think, it's an overall average game. It does enough for it to stand on its own, and I think there's that. For me, I had a lot of fun playing it. Like I don't regret it, and my misgivings I had for it didn't make me hate the game, and I don't like it any less. And it didn't make me feel like I wasted my time. It just made me feel like that there was some potential there to tell an interesting story, and it just every opportunity it had, it kind of dropped it. And it's like it played it safe, and in my opinion, I think they only played it safe because they probably wanted to be more of a successful game, and that's, in my opinion, what I think was going on. I think in a lot of ways, this company just wanted this game to be more successful for a mainstream audience, so they played it as safe as possible so that they could flesh out other things so that it can like be successful. So I think it's good overall. I just feel like it could be a little bit better. So that is it for my video on Tales of Arise. If you made it this far, I'm really surprised. This really went longer than what I was even expecting, but it is what it is. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Have a good week. Have a good weekend. Thanks for the support. Thanks for watching me on Twitch, YouTube, wherever you may be watching this. Thank you. And I hope to see you in the next stream or video. Bye-bye.